Classical Conversations presents Refining Rhetoric with CEO Robert Bortons, a podcast where faith, business, politics, and classical education meet. Join us as we use the classical tools of rhetoric to seek truth in every arena of life.
Hey everyone, want to interrupt this episode to let you know that Classical Conversations is hosting free one-day open houses where you and your family can come experience the joys of classical conversations. Classical Conversations Community Days in action are a sight to behold. You can go to classicalconversations.com/events and find open houses in your zip code and go visit for free today. That's classicalconversations.com/events and find an open house near you. Now let's jump back into the show. How should Christians vote? That's the important question we're going to be talking about today for the 2024 election. Many people believe this is the most consequential election in our lifetime. Sometimes that feels overplayed, but you can almost see the great divide in our country. And I do believe that it's important for all Christians to vote our faith and to understand what our worldview is and how we should really line up those questions on what is important to us, what's important, what does the Bible say, which party or which candidates are closest to that worldview or most likely to violate it the least amount, it seems sometime. And so let's talk about that today. First of all, though, I want to talk about when Christians should vote. And Christians, you should vote as soon as you're able to for a couple reasons. One, for your own sanity. Little secret, once you vote, people know whether you have voted or not. So the committees, the different people mailing you letters, as soon as you vote, about 24 hours later, you will get removed from their lists. So your mailbox will be not as full of junk mail, if you would call it that, during the election season once you go out there and vote. The other reason is you will always, if you are supporting and passionate about a candidate, they spend money trying to contact you until you vote. So once you vote, again, you're removed off that contact list. Well, they can actually take that money that they would have normally spent on you, upwards of $20, $30, $40 sometimes, depending on the election and what they are running for, and move that money to someone who might be less likely to vote or is undecided at this time. So if you're passionate about somebody, you can actually help them win the election by voting as soon as voting is available. I don't like to call it early voting and election day anymore. A lot of people don't think we'll know the results till Thursday or Friday of the presidential election. So we've got early voting and the last day of voting. And, I encourage you to, of course, vote in person if you can, vote by mail if you must, but vote is very important. I think it's a biblical responsibility of Christians to vote, at least here in the United States, because we have an opportunity to pick our leaders. The Bible is very clear of what type of leaders that we should be picking. A lot of times, we might not have all the characteristics we want, and so we need to look at the different platforms and different ideas that are available and present to us. Some of those things you can take at face value. Other things you might want to take a look at and see if you believe them or not based on their voting history. And look, I understand a lot of people don't have time for that. And so you have, the Democrat Party, the Republican Party, the Green parties, they all have their different party platforms. Each candidate is going to have a different degree of acceptance of the party platform. Some are going to be all in. Some have different thoughts on how to identify those ideas. One of the great resources I enjoy looking at every year is My Faith Votes, to see what's going on with the different parties and think through their platforms and ideas. And you can go, your denomination might have one of these. If you're part of a civics club, they might have one of these, and they might emphasize different aspects more heavily than this one does, or what you would do personally. But I always think We have the biblical commands that the Lord's given us through the Bible. Then that should have a framework that we work with, and then we should vote according to that framework. And so there's some big issues that typically are discussed. And so the first one, life and abortion. The Democrats have basically committed to codifying Roe v. Wade, which would basically make that the law of the land. States would not have a say in that. And the Republicans are not as strong as they typically are. One commentator said the Republican platform on abortion now is basically early. Like, if you're going to have it early. Again, not something that necessarily lines with the Bible, but that they do have in their platform, that the United States should have laws regarding liberty, and you cannot have liberty if you don't have life, and that they believe the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States guarantees that no person can be denied life or liberty without due process. And so I know that this has caused a lot of debate in Christian circles. Should you withhold your vote for a certain candidate in this aspect? I know a lot of people are, kind of one policy, one issue voters on the abortion issue. It's very clear that the Republican is a more pro-life, but not a pro-life position now. The Democrat position is definitely one of, abortion for any means possible. And some of that, I think I just want to say is, we have to do a better job as Christians of talking about pro-life and winning the hearts and minds of people. The Republican Party moved, I think, because we've done a poor job, that they saw elections were being lost on this issue. And part of the problem, we have to look internally. Is the pro-life movement clearly communicating why pro-life is the best position for everyone? And until we get that done, we will not be able to pass laws. We will not be able to get legislation done to protect life as soon as conception, which is when we believe that life starts and it needs to be protected. Next issue that they have on their comparison platform, marriage and sexuality. This is a big one for us as a business, because the Equality Act and different things that the Democrat Party have pledged themselves to basically would require us to set aside our moral worldview or face prison, face fines. And so they are all on board with every sort of sexual deviancy that is laid out in the Old Testament. They're pro for that. Republicans have, they believe in the sanctity of marriage, blessings of childhood, and then foundational role of families and supporting working parents. A big thing that we see now on the news is women's sports. And we know that a lot of men or people who were born men and have transitioned are competing in women's sports and setting records and things like that. Just creating an unlevel playing field, is denying biological reality, allowing men to use women's bathrooms. And so on the subject of marriage and sexuality, Republicans have stood strong on making sure that women have safe spaces for themselves and spaces where they can be themselves, versus the Democrat Party has taken a position of allowing inclusivity among bathrooms and sports, among other things. Israel and foreign policy. Both of these parties say that they stand with Israel, that it's a military opportunity. That's important that Israel can defend itself. The Vice President Harris basically has sided a little bit with Palestine, but not strongly. But both of them have really said that every innocent life is worth protecting, and that, of course, no one who is not involved in war should be part of that. And, of course, we know that President Trump had the Abraham Accords. He also moved our embassy to Israel. And so those are no president in the United States history has stood as strong with Israel. We also know that they are basically our only allies in that area. And so they stand with the Jewish people as well. So not a whole lot of differentiators there, other than we know that Trump has had a history of where his history is. We can go look at his policies and how they were beneficial. Healthcare. Democrats believe healthcare is a right in America, not a privilege. The Republicans are committed to reducing healthcare costs and lowering everyday expenses, as well as making sure that things are more affordable. Of course, my personal view is you need to get the government out of healthcare to make it more affordable, and neither of them are particularly taking that stance. Healthcare should be a right in America. I always ask people when they say, "Oh, healthcare should be free." It's like, okay, so are we going to enslave all the doctors? Are we making all the nurses slaves? I'm not sure how that's going to happen. It's like, oh no, the government's going to pay for it. Okay, well, if the government's paying for it, it's not free. It's taxed. Government's going to take their percent. We know that inflation is going to go higher, quality is going to go lower. And the Bible is very clear that if you do not work, you do not eat. So we can definitely apply that principle. If you do not work, you do not get health care either. And so, of course, we as Christians should have and be supporting low-cost clinics, free clinics. I always say when healthcare wasn't super expensive, we had Baptist hospitals that was actually ran by the Baptist Church for a while. And but once the insurance companies got their hands into it, we saw that prices increased, quality decreased, and you don't have that one-on-one relationship like you used to. So healthcare, Republicans seem to be a little bit more in line with a biblical truth here. Immigration and border, basically Kamala Harris has been the border czar. She has been in charge of the border, and we've seen 10 million plus people come through. They've lost 350,000 children that they cannot find at this point. But more of the same things of allowing people to come into our country and get into our welfare entitlement system. Versus the Republicans have offered a very aggressive plan to stop open border policies, to get illegal aliens, deadly drug dealers, and migrant crime out of our country, and to shore those up, and including using technology and different methods to have a mass deportation. And so for this, a lot of times you hear from people, well, the Bible tells us to take care of foreigners and these different groups of people, which is true, but we also do that individually. It's not the government's responsibility. And because the government does so many things it's not supposed to do, it isn't really a great system. And so we should have immigration reform. If you have open borders, you don't have a country. We do need foreign workers in our country, but we don't need to have them. We need to have them supplementing intelligently where we need them. And we need to be making sure that Americans have opportunity first. And those who are in true need need to be taken care of course, refugees. But if you think about, like myself, if you're a refugee, you're not going to abandon your wives and children at home and make this journey on your own. If you're truly in a situation like that, you're going to make sure that they get out as well. I mean, just think about the Titanic, right? Where the men gave up their spots on life rafts to make sure that the women and children were taken care of first. And so it doesn't appear that worldview is the worldview that's coming over our borders at this time. Religious freedom. And I would just say at this point, what I'm looking at the two, that religious freedom is to me, if you're going to be a one issue voter in this election, at least, of course, if we don't have the right to life, we don't have any rights at all. But the next thing is religious freedom. And the Democrat platform is we will combat hate crimes and white nationalist terrorism. We will prioritize the investigation of hate crimes against trans and non-binary people, and we will continue to increase security at houses of worship. And basically, they talk about the First Amendment. So we know that the matters of conscience, such as, do I take this vaccine? Do I perform an abortion? Do I use someone's sexual identity that God gave them or the one that they have chosen? Those are matters of great religious concern. And every single time the Democrats have really sided on protecting and those who have a worldview contrary to the given worldview and one against the religious worldview. And so we can be pretty clear that religious freedom is going to be under attack in a Kamala Harris presidency. We can just look at when she was over California's justice system. Planned Parenthood was selling baby parts for financial gain. And instead of persecuting them, which for doing something illegal, she actually went after those whistleblowers who exposed them. And so, I think it's really clear on her position there. The Republican Party says we are defenders of the First Amendment right to religious liberty. It protects the right not only to worship according to the dictates of consciousness, but also act in accordance with those beliefs, not in just places of worship, but in everyday life. And so they, of course, respect those religious views for anyone. So I think if you're saying I'm going to be a one issue voter this election, and I'm not sure, where I stand, religious freedom, because we are not going to be able to reform. We're not going to be able to have conversations about being pro-life if we don't have the religious freedom to have those conversations, because they're arresting pastors who are praying in front of abortion clinics. They, I think, sent to jail a woman who is in her late 70s who was praying in front of an abortion clinic. So religious freedom is under attack in our country, and it's only from one side of the aisle. In the environment, of course, we have the Green New Deal and those ideas that have been pushed by Kamala Harris and the Democrat Party, more producing of clean energy and those type of ideas. Under the Republicans, they want to unleash energy production from all sources, including nuclear, to immediately slash inflation and power American homes, cars, and factories with reliable, abundant, and affordable energy, which is great. And of course, we know under President Donald Trump, we had the cleanest water and cleanest air on record. And so it is possible that just you don't need government dictates to have clean water and clean air, that just as human beings, we want that for our families. And so this is the nonpartisan voter guide that they released. There's other ones out there that you can check out, and you can see which sides of the aisle you agree with more or less. Obviously, vote both sides of your voter card. The front typically has your, maybe bigger elections, people that you probably are seeing TV ads from. On the back side, it's going to be more local. It's a little bit more difficult maybe to get all that research or not have time for that. So using your this guide and understanding what the party platforms are can help you choose which candidate is more aligned with a biblical worldview. And I would just say that, I've seen some that said like they're more pro-Harris because Harris is pro the United Nations, and the United Nations is trying to solve world hunger. And so something like that, you have to ask yourself, do I really believe the United Nations is capable, and is it their responsibility to solve world hunger? And so something like that versus a more conservative position might be to end the United Nations or make sure the countries that are part of the United Nations are actually doing what they said that they're going to do instead of signing on to things and then never, ever executing them. And so you have to, kind of decide for yourself how much you trust these voter guides. And, this particular voter guide was produced before Harris and Biden were switched out by the Democrat Party. So they do have some quotes in here from Joe Biden, and you can decide yourself whether Harris is to the left, right, or center of what his views are. We can also think about what Joe Biden said himself, that she's been part of every single major decision out there. So in the end, at least on the presidential level, we've had President Trump as president for 4 years. We know the good, the bad, and the ugly there. We've had Vice President Harris being a vital voice in the last 4 years in the current administration, and we know kind of the results of those. And so, for the first time in a long time, it's a little bit easier on that level to really be able to say, cut through the rhetoric, look at policy, and see which policies align closest to a biblical worldview and our faith. So, vote early so that your mailbox gets cleaned up. Those that you do want to win are able to use their finances more effectively to win their campaigns, to make it so that if something does happen on election day and you can't get there, that you have not given to others what you should be doing yourself. And as Christians, it is our duty to vote. If we were in a different sort of government, we would have different duties. But since we have an opportunity to choose our leaders, we should choose ones that align with biblical principles and are going to advocate for policy that keeps civil government doing what civil government ought to do and allowing family and the church to do what they ought to do. Finally, I want to answer a couple questions from listeners that I asked for on my X earlier today. I said I'll be recording my Should Christian Vote podcast late today to be released tomorrow. What questions do you have or want me to address? One person wrote, do my morals and values have to 100% align with a candidate to vote for that candidate? I often get asked, how could you vote for such a blank type of person, whatever sins that you want to say. And so, a couple of things. One, we're all fallen, we're all sinful, so we recognize that. Is there a pattern of sin, that we see, and then how does that reflect in their policies? I think either individual, at least at the presidential level, there's plenty of things to nitpick. What's their recency of it? Is this someone who's moved on from that? Is this someone that is continuing that pattern? And then I think also asking the questions like, well, why do you believe this about this person? Is that really in their nature, or is that just how the media is portraying them? Have you gone and actually read what they said, or are you just taking secondhand knowledge? So the other thing I always like to remind people is I don't even always agree with myself. So, we'll never have that 100% alignment. And so that's why I think we have that foundation that we build upon, and then go from there. And then another person asked how to approach a church that recommends not voting if one can't decide, and or how to help the leaders to at least inform the issues of both sides. I think approaching a church, I always, you have to think about what is your role. Are you a member of that church? Because a lot of times I hear people say things about a church that they attend, and quite frankly, I would not personally be able to attend that church without having a conversation and just saying, this is what the Bible says. I believe you're acting contrary to that. Maybe you can tell me how this isn't, having that conversation, I think, is super important. And then, if they're not willing to do that, you are a member of that church, you have a voice yourself. And so using that voice appropriately. And, one of the things that I do at our church is just let people know, like, hey, I have a voter guide, or, hey, if you're interested in learning about the different policies and positions and my take on them, I'm happy to have that conversation with you or share how I'm voting this election. And so making yourself vulnerable and doing that yourself is a great way to do that. But in the end, for me, I personally think that if God tells us that we have certain roles and responsibilities, it obviously depends on what type of government you're in, how you can live those roles and responsibilities out, that it is our duty to vote. And I might not know, Joe's history versus Mo's history and every single thing they believe in, and don't really have time to research 100 different candidates. But going to these voter guides and seeing what the party is saying is going to give you a good understanding of at least where they're going to be headed and where they're going to be encouraged to vote. Where they might not have, differing ways of how they're going to vote or how they see these ideas being lived out. I think it's there's a reason that the parties do that, and to say that there's not resources available is kind of ignorant, and that's just not an accurate statement. So if they don't want to, say which side to vote for or which side to believe, there's certainly plenty of things out there that will help you see what they themselves are saying, and you can see it. Like, one of the things I looked up was the Catholic voter guide. There's multiple ones from different parts of the Catholic Church. There's more conservative ones, there's more progressive ones, and each of them, do dutifully lay out their positions. They just might take a different stance on which one lines up with a more biblical view, and then you have to decide, do you believe it or not? So those are two questions. Of course, I love interacting with people on X, and you can follow me, The Robert B. Show, and you can also follow the Refining Rhetoric podcast on X as well. We'd love to connect with you there. Well, thanks for tuning in today. Voting is always a difficult conversation. And as Christians, yes, we belong to a different kingdom. Jesus is king no matter who wins. But we also have a duty that king's given us while we're here on earth. And that is to be good citizens. And part of being good citizens is picking our civil leaders. And we get to do that every 2 to 4 years or 6 years, depending on the role. And sitting out is not an excuse. We should not let the pagans choose our leaders. Christians need to be choosing our leaders so that we have a government that respects and values what the Bible has to say, and so that we can have human flourishing for every single person, whether their race or their creed. So until next time, before next time, vote. And we will see you next week with another exciting episode of Refining Rhetoric. Be sure to share this one with a friend.
Thank you for listening to Refining Rhetoric with Robert Bortons. Want more? Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. You can also follow us on social media to continue the conversation, and visit classicalconversations.com/rhetoric to find out how you can join a local homeschool community.